Welcome to another edition of Crime News with Mark Solomon. It's Saturday, July 3rd, 2021, and new reports were released on July 1st detailing some very interesting facts in the Vallow Daybell case. We're going to talk about that. We're going to be talking about Brandon Boudreaux and his connection to this, which we have not mentioned before in my video series. We're also going to be talking about co-conspirator liability and how that affects the case and cases in front of the courts now. But before we get to that, don't forget to click like and subscribe with a little bell next to it to be notified of future videos. If you're enjoying this video, you'll maybe enjoy the next one just as much, if not more. Click the bell and you'll see. So let's talk a little bit about Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell, Alex Cox, Brandon Boudreaux. We're going to stop with those names. We don't want to confuse anybody. I'm just going to bring everybody back up to speed. This is a confusing case. A lot of facts here. Let's start at the sort of beginning. 2019, July 11. Alex Cox is alleged. Well, he shot at and took Charles Vallow's life. He claimed it was self-defense. We're going to be talking a lot about that today because Lori Vallow has just been indicted last week on his death and also the conspiracy leading up to his death. September, JJ and Tylee go missing. October 3rd, there was a reported shooting at Boudreaux. Boudreaux calls police. We're going to be talking a little bit about that too. October 9, there was another reported shooting at Melani Daybell. Now, both of those people say that they thought it was Alex Cox. October 19, Tammy dies of natural causes. Now we know, well, at least we think we know it wasn't natural causes because Chad and Lori have been charged with her death. So that's something that we need to know more about with the autopsy still being sealed. Don't know why, but we pretty much think that with the symptoms that were reported that she was essentially executed in the same way Alex Cox was. We're not sure about that, but we're going to talk about that too. Next thing, November, JJ and Tylee are being actively investigated as far as their missing and their disappearance. Boudreaux's involved in that too. December 11, Tammy Daybell's body is exhumed, and December 12th, Alex Cox dies of a bilateral pulmonary embolus. So that pretty much brings us back up to speed in the timeline. Let's talk a little bit about the current news. These days, we're talking about how literally just yesterday and the day before, police released information relating to charges against Lori Vallow in the death of her former husband, Charles, and that's what she's being now indicted for in Arizona. We're going to get to that in just a second. I just wanted to go over some of this. There's so much involved in the backstory here. There's the cult. There's the claiming of light and dark. We're going to be talking a little bit about how they thought people who didn't follow what they believed were zombies, and only 144,000 people were set to live. Okay, let's just move past that for a second. Let's talk about this one right here. This is the Gilbert drive-by shooting tied to the Idaho missing children. Now, this was published December 31st, but this is detailing the October 2nd shooting at Brandon Boudreaux. He thinks that Alex Cox was the one who did it. Vallow died July 11, and that's really the focus of our video here today. Let's go ahead and get to the reports that were just released. I'm going to start at the beginning. I'm not going over it all. I'm going to link to where you can get it to yourself, but these are the basic facts, and I'm going to spend a few minutes on this. So if you might need to take notes, I certainly did. So July 11, the Chandler Police Department was called to the address, referenced a shooting. Caller identified himself as Alex Cox and said he had shot his brother, Charles Vallow, in self-defense. They were concerned at the time about a bullet strike on the ground near the body. And they were also concerned about the timeline of events that came to light in the days following the homicide. Now, it's not unusual. And here they say none of these concerns would immediately provide probable cause for the arrest of anyone present. So they thought things were fishy, but they didn't think it was they didn't think it rose to the level of probable cause, at least not yet. Skipping down here, we're going here to October 2nd, but they were taught, and this is a redacted section, but we're pretty sure that this is an attempted murder of Boudreaux, and that on 10/2/19 reported that somebody shot at him when he was arriving home. He suspected that the shooter was Alex Cox. He further reported that Lori Vallow was to blame for the impending divorce from his wife, Melani. It just, all the facts fit. The niece to Lori, which is exactly the relation between Brandon Boudreaux and Lori Vallow. Let's see. Suspected the beliefs led him to lose his wife and also the murder of Charles Vallow. Okay. They had these ideas in the occult because of the abilities provided to them that they felt they were qualified to tell whether somebody had light or dark scale associated with them. The scale would indicate whether or not they had demonic spirits attached to them. Here we go. And by a certain level of spirit, by using the term zombies, Lori and Chad had shared a trust level in referring to others. They texted each other, and this is where things get interesting. The first evidence to cause harm to Charles Vallow was discovered in a text message between Blank and Lori Vallow on 11/3/18. Blank is a friend of Lori Vallow's and the widow of Alex Cox. Cellular phone was seized and data extracted by the Gilbert Police Department. Now, I'm going to stop there for a second. Remember, I've done videos on this. Cellular phone data extraction is a science. They can't just look at your phone and take screenshots. They do a write-protected extraction. They then examine the data using software. One of the most popular ones is Celebrate. And what they do is they make sure that they're not changing the data on the phone. They take the data off the phone, and then they make sure that they're not changing or altering the data in any way while they're getting the reports. If you go into a phone, it changes data access times and all that other good stuff. They did not do that. They did this correctly. Hats off to them on that. So they did the cellular extraction after the death of Alex Cox, and they found a lot of information that we are not privy to in this report. But all these texts flowing back and forth, and again, between Lori and Chad, and then here Alex Cox on 6/22 entered the conversation regarding Hiplos for Charles Vallow. That was their code name for him. Alex started to text, and then a search warrant, they found that this number was Alex Cox. And they're trying to change him to the light. That obviously did not work. And more redaction. And again, here. Now, this is the date in question. This is really important. July 11, 2019, 7:35 in the morning, Charles Vallow arrived at the Four Peaks place to pick up JJ. When he arrived, he told Alex that he was there. He then told Charles that they were planning something, and Charles said absolutely. Somebody indicated that they were supposed to spend the night with Alex, but Lori probably blocked that. That's probably Ty Lee. This next paragraph is the facts of the actual death. Following the murder of Charles Vallow, this next paragraph is probably the most compelling. Following the death of Charles Vallow, Lori took his rental vehicle and cellular phone. GPS data associated with the phone indicated that the phone left the residence at 7:49 in the morning. Lori then went to Burger King to get food for JJ and Walgreens to get flip-flops, returned home at 8:48. Alex would not call 911 until 8:32 in the morning to report the shooting. Wow. 8:32 in the morning. That's 40 some minutes after the alleged self-defense incident. That's not consistent with anything other than somebody trying to hide facts or delay police response or making sure somebody has passed away before an emergency response is in place. As such, that's exceptionally concerning. When reporting the incident, allocated that it had just happened. That can't be true. And so now, when we talk about these types of reports, the timeline, matters in minutes. When shootings are involved, minutes matter. He was provided with CPR instructions and acted as though he was performing life-saving measures, also, performing a fraud on the emergency services. And it was not until emergency personnel began life-saving measures that they saw blood coming from his body. This would indicate that he performed no emergency aid. That's falsehood number 3. And Charles would have laid dead or dying for approximately 43 minutes before Alex called 911. 43 minutes. During this time, phone records indicate that Alex called Lori. What did he say? Only she knows. And next, I thought it was interesting to point out that as part of the investigation, he did a walkthrough with the investigators. And this is where we go back to the first couple paragraphs of this report. And he says that Charles was coming at him and he shot twice in the chest while Charles was standing. But this angle would indicate that Charles was laying on the floor when the second shot was fired. So in other words, of the 2 shots, one went straight ahead and the other went down into Charles as he was laying on the ground. Very concerning. It's terrifying. So that is the report. When we talk about these types of inconsistencies in a police investigation, I always talk about how people have the right to remain silent. They do not have a right to lie. And so when you say something on 911, it's always recorded. When you say something to a police officer these days, they almost always have a body camera. You can't then go back and say something different unless there's a reason for you to have been actually wrong. And in this case, with those facts, Alex Cox was clearly telling untruths. He was not being honest with 911 and he was not being honest with the police officers because the facts literally just contradict what he was saying. So that would pretty much speak to whether or not this was self-defense or not. What do you think? Put it in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Let's move on a little bit to co-conspirator liability. When I talk about, I did a video about can Chad blame Lori? And the answer is anybody can blame anything. The real question is, does it have any merit or weight? I wanted to talk about this Pinkerton liability, which, spoiler alert, this is not the law in Idaho, but I want to talk about it anyway. Basically, the Pinkerton liability rule comes from an old case. Long story short, people conspired. They ended up they did a conspiracy. They ended up committing a murder. The murder was committed by some of the conspirators, but not all. And the question for the court back then was, could a conspiracy with a completed crime at the other end be tied back to all the conspirators, even if some of the conspirators had absolutely nothing to do with the completed crime? And the answer under the Pinkerton rule was, yes, it can. So the left hand doesn't have to know what the right hand is doing. So if I conspire with 2 people to commit a murder, but, and we even go out, say, to get guns or whatever to complete the murder, but then I don't do anything else. The real question is, could the Pinkerton rule apply if they go out and kill, or if one of them goes out and kills unbeknownst to us, not even following the plan that we had? And the answer is, under the Pinkerton rule, yes. However, in the state of Idaho, very importantly, this is a case that I found which clearly says State v. Navarez, and I'll link to that in the description below. And I'm just going to read the final conclusion here. And it just says that the application of the Pinkerton theory would override the limits on criminal liability that are established by this carefully crafted legislative enactment. Therefore, whether the Pinkerton theory of liability amounts to good public policy or beside the point, the Pinkerton theory has not been embraced by the Idaho legislature and therefore is not part of the criminal laws of this state. Okay, that's important. Let me just say that the case also talks a lot about how you could be found liable for the acts of another, and it goes back to basic principal and accessory liability. In other words, if you're an accessory before the fact, if you aid, abet, or encourage, think about that. Aiding, abetting, or encourage. If I helped somebody get the gun in the conspiracy, that's aiding. If I encourage somebody to commit the crime, that's that makes me a principal. That makes me an accessory before the fact, which carries the exact same criminal liability as a person who actually commits the crime. So does it really matter that the Pinkerton rule doesn't actually follow? Yes, it's a different standard, but think about it like this. If you want to run a marathon and I say, hey, I'll run the marathon with you, and then I don't run the marathon, but you show up to the marathon, did I aid or encourage you to go into the marathon because you thought you had moral support, even though I flaked out and didn't go? I think the answer is probably yes. So in other words, if there is a conspiracy, and we see a lot of evidence that a conspiracy exists, the next question is, can they use the evidence of that conspiracy to prove that either Chad or Lori aided or abetted in Alex's actual completed crime in the death of Charles Vallow? I think the answer is yes. That seems to be consistent with all the articles and facts and now the new released police report. So, whether they can claim that, they didn't know what he was doing or not, I think with this evidence that really became a lot less convincing. And the idea that Alex really didn't have much of a motive other than to help his sister to get rid of Charles, I think that's probably much more of a convincing fact. We had a lot of viewers say things like, the Occam's razor, often the simplest theory is the best. And when there's a murder and there's a spouse, the first place you look is the spouse. And in that set of facts we're looking at, that's Lori Vallow. So that's what I've got for today. If you've got any questions, thoughts, comments, issues, I'd love to hear them in the comments below. Very interesting set of facts, very complicated. If you have any questions, I'd love to hear them. Thank you so much for watching.